The streets of Genoa City are once again drowning in secrets, manipulation, and dangerous alliances. What looks like control on the surface is slowly turning into chaos underneath, as powerful enemies and broken loyalties collide. In this unfolding storm, Jack Abbott, Victor Newman, Patty Williams, Diane Jenkins Abbott, and Matt Clark all find themselves trapped in a game where trust no longer exists. At the center of the chaos, Jack Abbott is facing one of the most terrifying situations of his life. His wife, Diane Jenkins Abbott, is missing, but not by accident. Behind the scenes, Patty Williams has orchestrated a disturbing plan. To the outside world, it appears Diane suffered a mental health crisis and is receiving treatment. But the truth is far darker. Diane is being held against her will in a carefully controlled captivity, orchestrated by Patty and her accomplice, Dr. Lawrence Markham. Patty is no longer hiding her intentions. She has stepped directly into Jack's life, making it clear that she knows exactly what happened to Diane. Instead of fear or secrecy, she is operating with bold confidence. Patty delivers a chilling message to Jack: if he wants any chance of helping Diane recover, he must cooperate with her demands. But this cooperation comes at a cost that Jack cannot easily accept. Patty's psychological pressure on Jack is calculated. She doesn't just want control, she wants emotional dominance. By inserting herself into Jack's life, she forces him into an impossible position where every decision could risk Diane's safety. Jack is left with only one option: play along, even if it means stepping into dangerous emotional territory with a woman he knows cannot be trusted. Meanwhile, Diane is trapped in a completely different nightmare. Confused, isolated, and cut off from the outside world, she finds herself under the watch of Dr. Lawrence Markham. The situation is carefully staged to look like medical care, but in reality, it is a psychological prison. Diane quickly realizes that escaping will require more than strength, it will require strategy. Instead of resisting aggressively, Diane begins to adapt. She starts observing Dr. Markham closely, analyzing his behavior, and looking for weaknesses. She realizes that direct confrontation could make things worse, so she shifts her approach. Slowly, she begins to use words instead of force, carefully building a fragile sense of trust. Her goal is simple but risky: survive long enough to find an opening. At the same time, another dangerous storyline is unfolding under Victor Newman's control. Victor is dealing with Matt Clark, a man whose condition is far more complicated than it appears. Matt is struggling with memory loss, and Victor is using that vulnerability as an opportunity. Instead of offering full support, Victor is positioning Matt as a tool in a much larger plan involving Cane Ashby. Matt is trying to regain stability, but he is constantly being influenced and directed. Victor keeps him close, guiding his interactions and carefully placing him in situations where he can observe Cane without raising suspicion. On the surface, it looks like rehabilitation, but behind the curtain, it is manipulation. Victor's strategy is simple: turn Matt into an unseen observer inside Cane Ashby's world. But this plan carries risk. Cane is not easily fooled, and those around him are already questioning sudden changes and unexpected introductions. One wrong move could expose everything Victor has built. Back at the center of the emotional storm, Jack is beginning to feel the weight of his decision. Every step closer to Patty feels like a step further away from safety. Yet every step away from her could put Diane in greater danger. This impossible balance is slowly breaking him down. Still, Jack refuses to give up. His love for Diane pushes him forward, even as the situation becomes more unstable. Patty, however, is not acting alone in desperation. She appears calm, controlled, and fully committed to her plan. But beneath that surface lies something unpredictable. Her behavior suggests a mix of obsession and calculated revenge, making her actions even more dangerous. The more control she gains, the more unstable the entire situation becomes. As these separate storylines begin to tighten together, one thing becomes clear: Genoa City is heading toward a breaking point. Jack's sacrifice, Diane's captivity, Victor's manipulation, and Patty's obsession are all moving toward a collision that cannot be avoided. And when it finally happens, nothing in this city will remain the same. As the tension in Genoa City continues to rise, the situation surrounding Jack Abbott and Diane Jenkins Abbott becomes even more dangerous. What started as manipulation has now turned into a full psychological war, where every character is forced to operate under pressure, fear, and hidden agendas. Jack Abbott is now fully aware that time is working against him. Patty Williams has made her position clear. She holds the key to Diane's supposed recovery, but that key is locked behind obedience and emotional control. Jack understands that Patty is not offering help out of kindness. Instead, she is building a situation where he becomes emotionally dependent on her approval, even if only on the surface. This creates a disturbing dynamic. Jack must now act carefully, balancing suspicion with cooperation. Every word he speaks to Patty is measured. Every reaction is controlled. Because Jack knows that one wrong move could push Diane deeper into danger. Patty, on the other hand, seems to enjoy this imbalance of power. She feeds off Jack's discomfort, subtly tightening her influence over him with each passing moment. Meanwhile, Diane is fighting a completely different battle, one that is silent but equally intense. Inside Dr. Lawrence Markham's controlled environment, she continues to play along with the illusion being created around her. She understands that resistance alone will not free her. Instead, she begins to shift into survival mode. Diane carefully observes Dr. Markham's behavior patterns. She studies his emotional reactions, his pride, and the way he responds to validation. Slowly, she begins to build a strategy not based on force, but on psychological manipulation. By appearing compliant and even grateful, Diane creates the illusion that she is accepting her situation. This decision is not easy. Every moment of compliance feels like surrender. But Diane knows the truth: survival sometimes requires deception. If Dr. Markham believes she is no longer a threat, his guard may drop. And that is exactly what Diane is waiting for. Elsewhere, Victor Newman is continuing to control his own dangerous chessboard. Matt Clark remains at the center of Victor's latest strategy. With Matt's memory still unstable, Victor uses his confusion as a tool rather than treating it as a condition that needs healing. Victor's plan involves positioning Matt closer to Cane Ashby, while keeping him under observation. On the surface, it looks like rehabilitation and reintegration into society. But behind closed doors, it is a calculated intelligence-gathering operation. Matt is instructed, guided, and carefully placed in social situations where he can observe Cane's behavior without raising suspicion. However, the emotional toll on Matt is beginning to show. He is struggling to distinguish between what is real and what is being influenced. His sense of identity feels unstable, and that makes him even more unpredictable. Cane Ashby, meanwhile, is not blind to the shifting dynamics around him. He senses that something is off. The sudden introductions, the carefully arranged encounters, and the presence of unfamiliar faces all begin to raise suspicion. Cane is not easily manipulated, and that makes Victor's plan significantly more dangerous. Back in Jack's world, the emotional pressure continues to intensify. Patty is no longer just a threat in the background, she is now actively shaping Jack's daily reality. She demands attention, compliance, and emotional engagement, even if it is forced. Jack must constantly maintain the appearance of cooperation while internally planning a way out. At the same time, Jack's fear for Diane grows stronger. The uncertainty surrounding her condition weighs heavily on him. He does not know where she is, how she is being treated, or how long she can survive in this situation. This lack of information is what makes Patty's control so effective. It keeps Jack trapped in uncertainty. But cracks are beginning to form in Patty's control. While she appears confident, there are moments where her behavior becomes unpredictable. Small emotional shifts suggest that her grip on the situation may not be as stable as it seems. Whether this instability will work in Jack's favor or create more danger remains uncertain. As all these storylines continue to develop, Genoa City is moving closer to a breaking point. Jack's forced alliance, Diane's psychological survival game, Victor's manipulation of Matt, and Cane's growing suspicion are all converging towards something much larger. A confrontation is coming, and when it arrives, every hidden truth will begin to surface. The pressure in Genoa City continues to build as every major player becomes more deeply trapped in their own version of a dangerous game. What once looked like separate storylines is now clearly becoming an interconnected web of manipulation, fear, and hidden control. Jack Abbott is reaching a critical emotional point. His forced proximity to Patty Williams is no longer just uncomfortable, it is becoming psychologically draining. Every interaction feels like walking through a minefield. Patty continues to position herself as the gatekeeper of Diane Jenkins Abbott's fate, and that gives her a powerful advantage. Jack knows that Patty is not acting out of logic or fairness. Her behavior is driven by obsession, resentment, and emotional imbalance. Yet, despite understanding this, Jack has no clean escape. He is forced to maintain the illusion that he is cooperating with her, even when every instinct tells him to resist. Patty, however, is becoming more bold in her approach. She no longer hides her expectations. She wants emotional validation from Jack, not just compliance. She pushes for conversations that blur boundaries, testing how far she can stretch his patience and control his reactions. Jack responds carefully, never giving her the emotional reaction she truly wants, but also never pushing her too far. Behind this tense emotional standoff, Diane Jenkins Abbott continues her survival strategy inside Dr. Lawrence Markham's controlled environment. Her earlier decision to appear cooperative is now beginning to show results. Dr. Markham is slowly lowering his suspicion, interpreting Diane's behavior as acceptance rather than resistance. Diane uses this to her advantage. She begins to subtly guide conversations, asking questions that seem innocent but are actually designed to gather information. She carefully studies the environment, looking for routines, weaknesses in security, and emotional triggers in Dr. Markham himself. Every small detail matters. A misplaced comment. A moment of distraction. A pattern in behavior. Diane is building a mental map of her captivity, one piece at a time. She knows that rushing any escape attempt would be dangerous, so patience becomes her strongest weapon. At the same time, Victor Newman continues to operate in the shadows through Matt Clark. Matt is still struggling with memory instability, and Victor is taking full advantage of this vulnerability. Instead of offering clarity, Victor keeps Matt in a controlled state of confusion, guiding him step by step into his larger plan involving Cane Ashby. Matt is now being placed in more direct proximity to Cane. These encounters are carefully arranged, designed to look natural while actually serving a hidden purpose. Matt is instructed to observe, listen, and report back information that could be useful to Victor. But the psychological strain on Matt is increasing. He is beginning to question the reality of his own actions. There are moments where he feels like he is participating in something important, and other moments where everything feels manipulated and unclear. This instability makes him both useful and dangerous at the same time. Cane Ashby, meanwhile, is growing more alert. He senses inconsistencies in the people around him, especially in the way certain interactions seem too perfectly timed. Cane is not openly accusing anyone yet, but his suspicion is clearly building. He is observing more closely, questioning motives, and paying attention to details that others might overlook. This rising suspicion creates a new layer of risk for Victor's entire operation. If Cane connects the dots too early, the entire plan involving Matt could collapse instantly. Victor understands this danger, but he continues forward anyway, trusting his ability to stay several steps ahead. Back in the central emotional conflict, Jack begins to notice something subtle about Patty's behavior. While she appears confident and in control, there are moments where her emotional stability seems fragile. Small shifts in tone, sudden changes in mood, and overreactions to minor details suggest that her control over the situation is not as perfect as she believes. Jack carefully observes these cracks. He does not react to them openly, but internally he begins to consider possibilities. If Patty's emotional state is unstable, then her grip on Diane's situation may also be vulnerable. This realization gives Jack a small but growing sense of hope. However, hope in Genoa City is always dangerous. Every advantage comes with a risk, and every opportunity can quickly turn into a trap. As the episode progresses, it becomes clear that all these tensions are slowly tightening toward a single point. Jack's forced alliance, Diane's quiet resistance, Victor's manipulation of Matt, and Cane's growing awareness are all moving on a collision course. And when that collision happens, the consequences will be irreversible. As the pressure in Genoa City escalates, the fragile balance holding each storyline together begins to weaken. Secrets are no longer staying buried, and every character is now operating closer to exposure than ever before. Jack Abbott finds himself trapped deeper in Patty Williams' psychological web. What once felt like a temporary strategy is now becoming a dangerous routine. Jack must constantly maintain the appearance of cooperation, even when Patty's demands push him closer to emotional breaking points. Patty's behavior is becoming increasingly intense. She no longer limits herself to indirect control, she begins testing direct emotional influence. She watches Jack closely, analyzing his tone, his hesitation, and even his silence. To Patty, every reaction is meaningful. To Jack, every interaction is a calculated risk. Jack continues to play along, but internally, he is shifting into a different mindset. He is no longer just trying to survive the situation, he is now actively studying Patty. He begins to notice patterns in her emotional behavior, moments of insecurity hidden behind her confidence, and subtle inconsistencies in her narrative about Diane Jenkins Abbott's condition. These observations slowly reshape Jack's strategy. He starts to realize that Patty's control depends heavily on illusion. If that illusion breaks, her entire position becomes unstable. Meanwhile, Diane is reaching a turning point inside Dr. Lawrence Markham's controlled environment. Her earlier strategy of cooperation has created just enough trust to give her limited freedom within the space she is held in. This does not mean she is safe, but it does mean she is no longer constantly under strict suspicion. Diane uses this small advantage carefully. She begins to expand her exploration of the environment, paying attention to exit possibilities, schedules, and Dr. Markham's behavioral routines. She understands that timing is everything. Escape is not just about opportunity, it is about precision. At the same time, she continues her psychological approach with Dr. Markham. She reinforces his ego, subtly encourages his sense of superiority, and makes him believe that she is beginning to accept her situation. This delicate manipulation is dangerous, but necessary. The more Dr. Markham believes he is in control, the less he will monitor her closely. Elsewhere, Victor Newman's operation involving Matt Clark continues to evolve. Matt is now more deeply embedded in the environment surrounding Cane Ashby. His presence is no longer occasional, it is becoming structured and consistent. Victor uses Matt as an observational asset, feeding him instructions while maintaining the illusion that Matt is making independent decisions. This control is subtle but effective. Matt believes he is regaining purpose, while in reality, he is being guided step by step. However, Matt's internal conflict is becoming more visible. His memory instability is creating gaps in his understanding of events, and those gaps are beginning to affect his confidence. He sometimes questions whether he is being helped or used. This uncertainty makes him unpredictable, which introduces risk into Victor's carefully controlled plan. Cane Ashby continues to grow more suspicious of the people around him. The interactions involving Matt feel increasingly artificial. Cane notices timing inconsistencies, repeated coincidences, and overly structured introductions. While he has not yet confirmed anything concrete, his instincts are telling him that something larger is happening beneath the surface. This growing suspicion creates tension in every interaction Cane has moving forward. He becomes more cautious, more observant, and more resistant to influence. This shift threatens to expose Victor's entire strategy if it continues to escalate. Back in Jack's storyline, the emotional tension with Patty reaches a more complicated level. Patty begins to mix emotional vulnerability with control tactics. She occasionally reveals fragments of insecurity, only to quickly return to dominance. This unpredictable behavior makes her harder for Jack to read. Jack starts to recognize that Patty is not operating from a stable emotional foundation. Instead, her actions appear driven by unresolved obsession and a need for control that goes beyond the current situation. This realization strengthens Jack's internal resolve. He understands that dealing with Patty requires more than patience, it requires precision and timing. At the same time, Jack quietly begins to shift from passive cooperation to strategic resistance. He continues to play the role Patty expects, but internally, he is preparing for a moment where he can regain control of the situation. As all these developments unfold simultaneously, the overall tension in Genoa City becomes undeniable. Diane's captivity, Jack's forced deception, Victor's manipulation of Matt, and Cane's rising suspicion are all converging toward a critical breaking point. Nothing remains isolated anymore. Every decision is now influencing another storyline, pushing all characters closer to a moment of exposure. And that moment is approaching faster than anyone realizes. As Genoa City moves toward its breaking point, every hidden move, every lie, and every manipulation begins to tighten into a final chain reaction. What once felt like separate power struggles is now clearly becoming one connected storm, and no one involved is fully in control anymore. Jack Abbott is now operating in a state of controlled tension. His forced connection with Patty Williams has reached its most dangerous phase. What began as a strategic necessity has turned into a psychological battle of endurance. Jack continues to maintain his cover, but his patience is wearing thin. Patty, sensing both resistance and vulnerability, pushes harder than before. She begins to blur the lines between emotional manipulation and outright control. Her demands become less subtle, her expectations more direct. She wants not just cooperation, but emotional investment. Jack, however, refuses to give her the satisfaction of breaking his composure. Behind his calm exterior, Jack is now fully focused on one goal: finding a way to locate Diane Jenkins Abbott without triggering Patty's suspicion. Every conversation becomes a coded exchange in his mind, every interaction a potential opening. Jack is no longer reacting, he is planning. Meanwhile, Diane is entering the most critical stage of her captivity. Her strategy inside Dr. Lawrence Markham's environment has slowly evolved into a delicate balance of trust and observation. She has successfully lowered Dr. Markham's guard just enough to gain limited freedom within the space, and now she begins preparing for action. Diane carefully studies timing patterns, emotional shifts, and environmental weaknesses. She understands that her survival depends on patience, but freedom depends on precision. One mistake could reset everything. So she waits, calculating every possible outcome. Her psychological approach with Dr. Markham continues as well. She reinforces his ego, subtly validates his authority, and keeps him emotionally comfortable. This manipulation is not about affection, it is about control through perception. The more Dr. Markham believes Diane is compliant, the less attention he pays to her actions. But beneath that surface compliance, Diane is preparing for an escape opportunity that may come only once. Elsewhere, Victor Newman's manipulation of Matt Clark reaches a critical point. Matt is now fully embedded in the environment surrounding Cane Ashby, acting as Victor's eyes and ears. However, the instability in Matt's memory continues to grow. He begins to experience moments of doubt where reality feels fragmented. Instructions blur with personal memory gaps, and his sense of identity becomes increasingly unstable. This makes him both an asset and a liability. Victor still believes he can control the outcome, but Matt's unpredictability introduces a new level of risk. Cane Ashby, meanwhile, is now fully alert to the possibility of manipulation around him. The patterns he has observed can no longer be ignored. The timing of introductions, the repeated coincidences, and the overly structured interactions all point toward a coordinated effort. Cane does not yet know who is behind it, but he is now actively watching everyone around him. His trust is shrinking, and his awareness is expanding. This shift alone is enough to threaten Victor's entire operation involving Matt. Back in Jack's world, the emotional pressure reaches its peak. Patty's instability becomes more visible as her control begins to show cracks. Her confidence is no longer absolute. At moments, she appears uncertain, even reactive, rather than fully in control. Jack notices this change and quietly adjusts his approach. Instead of simply surviving Patty's control, he begins to test its limits. Small responses, careful hesitations, and subtle shifts in behavior are all part of his new strategy. He is now searching for a weak point, something that can break Patty's influence long enough to act. At the same time, the emotional weight of Diane's situation continues to drive him forward. Jack's determination is no longer just emotional, it is strategic. He understands that patience alone will not be enough. Action will eventually be required, and he is preparing for that moment. As all storylines converge, Genoa City stands on the edge of collapse. Diane's captivity, Jack's hidden resistance, Victor's manipulation of Matt, and Cane's growing suspicion are all aligned toward an inevitable confrontation. Nothing can remain hidden much longer. And when the truth finally breaks through, every alliance, every lie, and every carefully built plan will be exposed at once. The fallout will change everything. End of